Hi everyone, welcome back to another Culture Northumberland podcast with me, Claire Venus. I head up the Culture Northumberland project and have done since 2020. In terms of where we are right now, we're in a research and development phase. So we're taking a pause, we're having conversations, we're doing some deep listening. We are sharing some of those conversations so that you can all listen and follow our journey, suggest ideas. This will go out both on YouTube and as an audio and as a post. So you can join in the conversation in the comments if that feels good to you. But I'm delighted to be with three Northumberland artists who I'm going to let introduce themselves. We're going to go around the Zoom room and then we're going to have a conversation about the work that they've been doing with a consultant called Rebecca. We'll go into that a little bit more and find out what's been happening there because I need to catch up on that stuff as well. And you can all hear it in real time. So I'll just start with the top of my screen, which is Gillian. And Gillian, if you'd like to introduce yourself, that would be so lovely to hear about you and your practice and where you are in the world.
Okay, I'm Gillian Lee Smith. That's my artist name. I do have a married name as well, but I moved to Northumberland like 8 years ago from Nottingham. I'm originally from East Lothian in Scotland, and yeah, I moved here about 8 years ago just because we'd been on holiday here and just loved it, and I wanted to kind of establish myself as an artist long term in the place that I was going to live. So I'm a painter. Um, I'm also a mentor. I mentor other artists online and in person, and I create online courses as well. For my own work, I exhibit locally and nationally. And my work is I've got two main strands to my work. Um, there's kind of the sort of local history, legacy, memory, focus a lot on industry, like maritime industry, things like that. So it's kind of quite pertinent to where we live. Um, and then also I created a whole body of work that was woodland work that came out of the lockdown when we were all sort of doing our daily walks. So that's the work that I've been exhibiting recently, but there's kind of two strands to what I do as well as the mentoring as well. So
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It's lovely to hear more about you and how you ended up in Northumberland. It's like that fairy tale. It's really lovely here. I'm enchanted. Why don't we move here? I love that
yeah, Robson
story.
Green has a lot to answer
He
for with his
does, he
TV
does.
show.
He does. It's beautiful. And it's
Yeah,
so lovely that you've taken inspiration from your surroundings and all of that as well. That's really
yeah,
lovely to hear about.
definitely.
Thanks, Gillian. And then Laurie, you're at the next point in my screen. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and your practice, that would be great.
Yes, I'm Laurie Handley. I'm a painter. I'm originally from Yorkshire and moved here in 2018 to set up as a full-time artist. I was a resident artist at the Old Bath House along with Gillian and Helen, and I finished there 2022 December. So I now currently work from home in a purpose-built shed in the garden, which is lovely. I've got to say, it's very nice, tranquil. I live in Guysons Bridge, and it's rather lovely. I'm currently working on a course which is about building a body of work, and my future is really wanting to do solo exhibitions, and other, collaborative work as well once I
Be
finish my course. So yeah.
Beautiful. It's so nice to hear how that transition went from the old bathhouse and you all meeting to then you having your own studio in the garden. And I feel like I just need to make time to visit everyone's studios because we would love that too. And our planning permission got turned down last year. So we were quite burnt out by the process. It was very expensive. We worked with an architect and got it knocked back. And so we were just like,
No.
oh, let's have a pause. We'll see. There are so
Mhm.
many buildings that you can choose from. And what we'd done in our research was learn that actually like some of the expiration dates were around about sort of the 10-year mark. And we wanted to build something that could last a lot longer than that. So we kind of put more time, energy and resource into building something that was going to really work for what we needed as a family and what we needed for our work. But it wasn't to be. So we're waiting to see what's next. So I'm super curious how everybody's done this, how everybody's kind of managed these pop-up spaces and how it's all working for them. It sounds lovely. We've got quite a lot of problems with damp because we're right on the coast. So we need to be really mindful with that stuff. But yes, thank you, Laurie, for describing that scenario and how that all panned out. Helen, it'd be lovely to hear from you next, and hear about your practice too.
Hello. Yes, first of all, I just want to start by saying that I really welcome this opportunity to talk about my practice as a woman. I feel that, like, you know, women's voices often do not get heard. And it's because we work in a much more kind of gentler, intuitive way. So this is really nice to be able to do this and to talk about, you know, I don't feel like we're very good at talking about and blowing our own trumpet about what we do. So I've been a glass artist for 23 years in the Northeast. I started in my garage. And then over those years, I've developed my business, and each time I moved into Newcastle for a while and had a studio there. Then I moved back into Northumberland and found studios in farm buildings, then moved into what was originally the stables of the Stag's Head in Felton, that then became Gallery 45, and converted that into a studio. And then lastly, it was the old bathhouse, and that was, I moved into that as the first artist to move in there 6-7 years ago. And within that building, I saw I could kind of achieve my vision. And that vision was to build a community. And shortly after I moved in, another artist, Ellie Davidson Archer, moved in. And we got on very well. We had the same kind of vision, and together we worked at developing the open weekends. We worked at bringing tourists and locals in, workshops. A lot of my practice is around workshops, intergenerational workshops, different community groups. We worked with people like Newcastle Women's Aid, with Barnardo's, Newcastle University. We've worked with Dry Water Arts, you know, two exceptional women heading up a brilliant arts-based business in Amble there. We provided work experience opportunities for young adults. And we had space, you know, to offer artists workshop space if they wanted to run workshops, trying to support young artists emerging with studio space. So we kind of did all of that within the bathhouse. I know that's not really talking a lot specifically about what my particular practice is, but mine is, it's working with glass, it's workshops, it's commission work, and it's selling. But that I just wanted to get that over, that what we'd achieved, and we achieved it together. While some artists, you know, came in, some came out. At the peak, we had about 9 artists in there, and then when we were doing our kind of open days and open weekends, we had guest artists, and it was giving artists an opportunity to kind of link directly with the public and sell their work without incurring big fees, trying to support, you know, as much as possible. And so that kind of came to an end for me 6 months ago when I had to step out of that. And so I'm at the minute, I think, a bit lost as to kind of how my business, my practice moves forward. It's been a gift meeting Rebecca Phillips, who is supporting us. And yeah, I've got a studio now again at home. I feel like I've kind of come full circle. I started in my garage and I've kind of come back home. But I'm looking at, I'm working with my daughter, who is a multidisciplinary artist, Almudena Roca. We're looking at doing podcasts together, and that's going to be launched on the 1st of March. That's called Frit, Fire and the Feminine. and that will accumulate, it will culminate in an exhibition early next year at the Republic Gallery in Blythe. I'm building a body of work around aging and being an elder. So that's really, that's, you know, one of the things it has given me, stepping away from the old bathhouse, is time to kind of look at my own work and develop my own body of work. So yeah, I think that's all I that's what I
Thank you,
wanted to say.
Helen. Thank you. That was a very rich summary of where you've been, both place-based and where you've been in your artist journey. And there are so many threads that I want to pull on to bring us all back into that conversation. Thank you so much for that. So I spoke a little bit with Luke McTaggart a few weeks ago. So we touched on this environment of the old bathhouse. So there's something in that collaborative space of depth of connection that artists have been able to have being under the same roof, and then that open studio environment, which I came along to one of those open studios and it was glorious, really lovely, and unexpected day out for lots of reasons. There's something about when we're able to make work on our doorsteps, but also be in close proximity with other artists in the same kind of bubble of experiencing the same sort of challenges and frustrations, and there's something around the momentum that we're able to build up when we're together that has been coming out in a lot of conversations with individual artists, and organizations recognize it too. So yeah, I would like to talk more about the relationship that you all have with Rebecca, because it's been a long time since we've seen each other. Like, it's at least 6 months. There was an email that came in, I think, before Christmas, which I read, and it seems like things have really moved on in terms of what might be possible with you all working together, or what you might be able to do, whether you're working on strategy or funding applications. I'm not quite sure. So it would be lovely to hear from one of you about that, if you don't mind. Gillian or Helen, I don't know. Do you want to?
Helen, do you want to say?
Well, for me, I'm not at the minute looking at funding applications. Like I say, I've kind of stepped away from the bathhouse, but I'm looking at, you know, how to keep connected.
Yes.
To the bigger picture and to what is going on in Northumberland. Because at the minute I do feel like quite isolated after being in that building, in the old bathhouse. It's yeah, I'm, you know, so I'm feeling my way at the minute.
Yeah. So it's a bit of kind of coming back to center and then listening in and seeing what else is going on. I mean, maybe it's more helpful that I catch up with Rebecca. Like I said, I thought she was going to be here today, so I thought that's what we were doing. So I can do that separately, and that's fine. And we can take this conversation in another direction. That's fine with me.
I think we're really at the very early stages of it. We have been working with Rebecca for a while, and I just want to actually highlight, because I did want to highlight what she's doing with us, and I even sort of messaged her to say, what is your job title, because I think it's so broad. And she is a development consultant working with leaders, organizations, and strategic partnerships in regions and cities. And she's worked with lots of sectors, including the creative and the arts sector. And we got together with her last year, and we started off in a larger group that kind of ended up sort of becoming a smaller group over time, just because of people's needs and where they want it to be going. And we're really, I think one of the words that we've been using is kind of gentle evolution. We're really just kind of figuring out, I think we're starting by asking questions is what we're doing. We're not trying to come up with any answers right now. We're getting together and having lots of conversations about the things that we need as individual artists, but also what we could do as a group. So we don't have the answers to that right now. I think it is just kind of it takes time, doesn't it? And it takes time with the challenges with what we have in the region. It's such a vast region with so many artists who are kind of dotted about everywhere. And to kind of come together in this small group has been really valuable to begin to open up possibilities, but not really to know what they are at the moment. So I think we're just kind of in that place of having the conversation. So I don't know if that's kind of
No, that's
it
really
sounds like we're not really
helpful.
doing anything, but actually I think there
Mm.
is a lot going on, but we're just kind of trying to figure out
It
where that
takes
might take
time,
us.
doesn't
So,
it? And I know, so Rebecca, last time we spoke, was kind of focused in on Amble, and I know Luke McTaggart is obviously he lives there and is focused in on what is possible in terms of cultural development in Amble. I don't know whether Rebecca's looking more region wide, or county wide. So we'll do some catching up and kind of figure out where those points of synchronicity are. But it is really interesting, this kind of ebb and flow of the pause moments in practice, because in the pandemic, we almost kind of fast forwarded the way we were able to collaborate in a way that we hadn't been able to do before here in Northumberland, because there were very, very few and far between opportunities to meet. And if we did meet in person, there were always people that couldn't be there. There was no zooming in, there was no, or, I'm sending my apologies, but here's an update. It was just that person isn't there. So they were kind of missing from the conversation. And now we've been able to bring people into the conversation in easier ways. And we've been able to understand people's practice and organizations' plans, goals, development at a much deeper level. And I feel at Culture Northumberland, Beth and I hold that relatively well, but there is still a lot of gaps. And so this conversation with you all was to try and help plug some of those gaps from an artist's perspective. And obviously you are all unique, but you share some of the same aspirations and challenges and frustrations. So yeah, that's what I'm super curious about. When I met with Trina Dilziel last week or the week before, we spent some time working out her journey as an artist, and she was in this real experimentational time of trying different things, applying for funding, putting herself forward for opportunities, doing new training pieces, and she's kind of circled back to doing what she knows after this piece of real experimentation, partly because there wasn't enough coming back from the investment of time that she'd given to the other work streams. And one of the big passions that I have personally, and I have for Culture Northumberland, is to try and help people to diversify their income streams, because by doing that, we help them to survive as an artist, and not just survive, but thrive, and have headspace and time for collaborations, have headspace and time for further planning, not just thinking about this week and then next week. So I'm curious with you all, how you all approach your practice, whether that's commission-based work, whether that's selling, whether you feel at the moment, right here and now, if there is enough work for you, is there enough income? Like, does that feel steady and stable? Do you feel like you have time to invest in other projects, more, into listening and kind of leaning into your practice? Does it feel okay? Because what I've been hearing from the sector is it's really hard.
I can maybe say something about that. Laurie and Helen both mentioned a program called Building a Body of Work. That's actually my program. So I just want to shout that out. And really I started that off before the pandemic. So I think I kind of realized for myself very early on that I had to create a side to my business practice that wasn't entirely based in my own artistic practice, but actually supported that. I think for the type of art that I create, I realized that I never wanted to be completely dependent on that for my income, because I have very strong elements to what my work that I want to keep there without thinking about the commerciality of it, and how I was going to sell that. So because I'd kind of shaped my own art practice and I'd really kind of looked at the strong foundations and fundamentals of it. For me, e-courses, creating online courses, mentoring other artists, creating the 10-month online program that is building a body of work has allowed me to work with people actually all over the world. I've had around 50 people go through that 10-month program now, and that has enabled me to create a fairly strong basis to my art practice and my art career. The struggle always is for artists is in exhibiting, accessible, purpose-led, artist-led opportunities to exhibit and get your work out there. And I think there's a struggle for me in not to kind of make that too commercial, but to create work that is very meaningful to me, that maybe isn't sellable in the way that some artwork is. And with the broadness of Northumberland, I feel like could be so many opportunities for that. You know, galleries are fantastic and I have my work in galleries, but for myself, I'd love to kind of see a broader range of ways for me and for others to get our artwork out there that is artist centered, you know, and you know, it's not to say it can't have a commercial aspect, but that isn't the only way to get your creativity and your artwork out there. And I do that by teaching and mentoring, but actually, I'd really love for that to happen with my art practice as well. Where can I show my art? Where can I exhibit my art? Could it be, you know, we mentioned buildings. Could it be taking over a building, for instance, and doing installations in a building? And in such a rural place as Northumberland, I feel like wouldn't it be wonderful if there were a lot more opportunities for that to happen? But maybe there is, and I just haven't seen it. Maybe I'm not looking in the right places, but you know, that hasn't really happened so far for me. So, for me, it's definitely having the kind of multi-stringed bow to my art practice that helps with the sustainability of it. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on that point, there are some opportunities, and you'll probably know about them already. I'm sure you'll be plugged in. And I think there is this piece around how to pitch, where to pitch, and what that deal should look like that is missing. So I tried to figure some of that out for myself, created a journal with the last lot of Arts Council funding specifically for mums. So it was a participatory journal where there were online elements, but a physical journal. So I did some of that research as part of that project, and it was really insightful to realize that there isn't really a set way to kind of have that work put somewhere. There are just these kind of negotiative conversations, and I would love to kind of lean into that more. I've worked with Penny at Old School Gallery quite a lot. Obviously I know the team at Gallery 45 as well. And then within the buildings, so our cultural buildings, there's an openness to cross art forms. So obviously you'll have seen the gallery at Annick Playhouse. I think Luke has work in there at the moment, and there are more plans for gallery spaces depending on how everything goes there. Berwick Maltings were really open to that part of the conversation when I spoke to them. Trina and I spoke about the biscuit factory specifically, and what was possible in showcasing there in terms of income, really, and that longevity of that partnership. So if you knew that you had that within your career every single year, for example, and you know that they take 50% commission, you can kind of work out based on how many pieces are selling or what price point to charge. So there was a really interesting conversation there, because it does get quite a lot of footfall. It is well known, whereas I don't think we have the same footfall in Northumberland, but we do have these opportunities around tourism. So at the Almouth Art Fair, when I was involved in the early years of that project, obviously everybody was completely overwhelmed at the amount of footfall that they were able to draw in for a weekend. And the artists themselves were very overwhelmed at what they were able to sell, saying things like, this has set me up for the year ahead. Like, this one weekend and the sales I've been able to make, that's me now. You know, I'm fine for the rest of the year, which seems just incredible. But that, you know, it was quite a while ago. So I think post-pandemic, people have started looking at what are the possibilities of pushing artists' work online. So is there something around online galleries that we can be doing that, again, has this space where it can be recognized in physical buildings as well, and not typical physical buildings, because there are only so many gallery spaces in Northumberland, but there are lots of other spaces. So, you know, the tourism industry is very big. There are a lot of hotels and B&Bs, and there are a lot of kind of cafes and restaurants and other spaces. So yeah, this thread has been tugged on quite a lot. And I do think there's a piece of work here. The last Arts Council application I wrote, I talked about a takeover weekend in the town of Annick that saw multiple art forms showcased across multiple spaces for the weekend, like for a long weekend, but we didn't get that one. But what I've heard from Arts Council is it's not about the quality of application or the ask, it's just about the amount of applications going in, and there isn't another way to fund that work. You know, I don't think, I've looked at it every single which way, and it's just really hard to fund the organisation of it all and the kind of bringing everybody together to make sure it all works. Not impossible, but yeah, a challenge for me. And so thinking about what you're all doing now and how that could contribute towards the conversation, what's exciting for me is I have it now from multiple sources, this kind of insight into what you all want and what is missing from where we are in Northumberland. Laurie or Helen, would you like to talk to some of that as well? I'd love to hear from you both on those points of showcasing and selling and opportunities and getting your work seen, getting your work out there, other ways maybe that we haven't thought about doing that.
There's something that I've found since I've been working at home very much is the lack of ability to work on something big or something collaborative because of lack of space. So if you're working from home in a little shed, I can't therefore do like an 8-foot square piece. You know, it's just not possible. So sort of something like hireable, short term. You know, rather than renting a building for 3 years or something, having something where you can book in, something like that would be very useful. Also for being able to put on workshops and to do collaborative work with other artists. That seems to be one of the things that we're very much lacking, is places that are affordable as well to artists to be able to do those things. Yeah, so that's really what I'm thinking. For me at the moment, I'm not quite ready to be exhibiting. I'm not ready to be, you know, wanting to apply for funding or anything like that at this point. But that's all stuff that I will need in the future. But in the meantime, it's the being able to create the work that you want to work.
Yes, for sure. And that came up, I think it came up when we had a get together around creativity and well-being, and that place of larger spaces to just play, to just experiment, to just know that you could make a piece of work within an environment and it didn't have to be for anything. It was that experimental sort of play day. It also came up in my conversation with Trina, and I know we've looked at the space at Esther's space in Cambos before, because they've got the Mining Institute there, which is a lovely big space, but it's not heated, so it's really quite seasonal in terms of how long you'd be able
Seems
to
to be a
stay
common
there
theme with
without.
spaces
Yeah,
Yeah.
The old bathhouse isn't heated either.
yeah, that's it, isn't it? It's like a resilience, isn't it? Like, what can I create when I'm freezing? I don't know. But yeah, it's come out a lot, and it's super interesting because there's a piece around artist process at a different scale that is interesting to the public. So there's a bit about you being able to just have a space and come together. And then there's a bit about being able to share process and share the behind the scenes that has always been at the core of what we do at Culture Northumberland, where we can say, you know, it's not just about here's the shiny showcase finished product. Like, how do we showcase that process? How do we talk about that more and share some of that expertise and share some of that learning? So yeah, that sounds very exciting. Helen, is there anything that chimed for you in those conversations we've just had there?
I think you know, I feel like I've stepped away. I've got a studio at home. I'm feeling isolated at the minute. So it's I'm trying to keep in connection with other artists in the area, because what we had at the bathhouse I felt was very good. And there is this kind of you know, I find it difficult to see where I can exhibit my work, and looking at maybe more unusual spaces is good, and it's what we've talked about with Rebecca. I watch my daughter, who is 28, so she has just come out of art college, and she is in, you know, Guidepost, and she is working from her garage, and it's that lack of affordable studio space to support young emerging artists that I you know, I find kind of sad. And opportunities to show work without incurring, you know, large costs and fees. And these are, you know, it's like, since kind of moving out of the bathhouse, these are all the conversations we've been having kind of together with Rebecca. So it is kind of like bubbling away, and I don't want it to kind of sound too negative. And it, you know, we're in that kind of process, I just feel, of trying to find ways forward with our practice.
Yeah, for sure. I know Fran Arnold, who's based in Morpeth, is also looking at this piece of the picture, and it feels like everybody that I'm talking to that has a visual art practice or a physical art practice is looking at this. So Fran just got Developing Your Creative Practice funding from Arts Council, and part of her work is to look at this and to share it back with the sector. And I know sometimes it's about capacity. So when I was doing engagement work for Annick Playhouse, they have an incredible rehearsal room, which was the old wardrobe space that NTC used. And obviously when the building got refurbed and all of that, one of the first things Damien looked at was how to use that space, both as a rehearsal room space, but then as a, like, it's, you know, it's got sinks, it's got a washing machine, it's huge, you can spill things. It would be a great space for artists. So
but it's not accessible.
It's not accessible,
because
no.
I looked at it to maybe with the idea of like hiring it for to teach workshop space, but I've had someone come on my workshops who's in a wheelchair. So it's, you know, it's a fantastic space if only it were accessible.
Yeah, for sure. And that's so hard, especially because it's just been refurbed, you know, it's so hard that, and I know Berwick Maltons are having similar conversations with their building because their building isn't accessible, and they're looking at what might be possible if they do go through with a new building being built in its space. So there are
It's
all
one of the great things about the bathhouse. It was the accessibility of it. I
all
have
on
to
one
say, it was
floor for
fantastic.
sure. And then I wonder about other spaces that we already have in the region that, and when we talk about affordable, so we have a culture of a lot of community-based spaces here. So community centres, we've got some leisure centres. There are spaces, big spaces that we can hire and take over. And part of the research that I did when I had my Arts Council funding was, how does this actually work in real time? Because obviously being rural, there are not 20, 30, 40 people that are going to travel to those spaces. So, you know, I've been to workshops at Drywater Arts that are incredible, and there's 2 or 3 of us, you know, and it's like they're there all the time. That's their kind of permanent setup. So the community centre spaces that I worked with, it was negotiable. So they need it to be worth their while, but there's this rub point between, you need time to get in, so you need time to set up, you need the workshop delivery time, and then you need the takedown time as well. So that ends up being, for an hour-long workshop, probably a 3-hour booking, maybe more, maybe like a half-day booking. So as a one-off, that then ends up to be quite expensive. And in terms of what you're able to charge and what people are willing to pay, this whole bit of the conversation. On a longer term booking, the price is reduced. So if you were to do, say, a 5-week course, and then that culminated in an exhibition in that community centre, it's kind of hitting their aims and it's possible. There are pots of funding that can be kind of tapped into. So this partnership with community centres, in my research, was a kind of underused resource, and then they are struggling to stay open, struggling to make it all work. You know, some of them are CICs, so they've got some other opportunities there. They're supposed to be there to serve the community, but it feels like a real opportunity for strategy development, artist development, creative development that we're not quite looking at yet, because we don't know how, because we can only ever like plan for a one-off. So be too much of a financial risk to plan for a 10-week course, for example, unless we knew that we were going to get those participants in. So I wonder if any of you had any thoughts, or if you tried any of that type of work before.
I've done workshops at Acklington Village Hall, and it is very much as you say. You're allowed to be in from 10 o'clock and you've got to be out by 2. So that it gives you time for a coffee break, but that's it. And it's incredibly difficult to deliver a workshop, even though there are there are people who want to do the workshop. It's very difficult to charge enough money for what you're actually delivering, because they are, as you say, they're only getting 3 hours really. And also because the space, you couldn't really, certainly in that village hall, you couldn't say, right, I want to book this space out for 2 weeks, because you've got yoga club, you've got all the other clubs going on in that space. So there's no way you could cut all them out just so you can have a couple of weeks of using the hall. It needs to be somewhere that's purposely for delivering art, whether it's workshops. It can't be something that piggybacks on the back of a village hall, because there isn't the time and there isn't the space to do so. It's also very limiting as to what you can do. So you couldn't create messy art, because you would need to completely cover the place in polythene, because they're very precious about their buildings too.
It's so true. Yeah, they are, indeed.
Yeah.
And I found it to be wholly exhausting trying as a one-woman show, trying to bring everything in, hold space for participants, do the coffees, tidy up again. And I've been in situations where the person who's come to sort of let me in, or the key holder, whatever, has literally stood and waited for me to wash every last cup. There is no generosity of spirit of like, I'll give you a hand with those. And to me, that's not what community is. That's not what collaboration is. If I'm bringing money to the table and helping a building to stay open, I would expect somebody would give me a hand. Like, that's just polite human nature, and it just doesn't happen. And so then I don't do that work, right? Because I've only got so much energy in my week. So where am I going to spend that energy? And I've got to be discerning. We all have, haven't we? To survive and thrive and make sure that our businesses are building and working. So there's something I'm hearing about the right space and not trying to kind of shoehorn and make things fit for you all, which I've definitely felt as well. And there's something about the longevity of that relationship and it being fit for purpose and it being a welcoming space and something that can work. And there's an element of risk there, but not a risk so big to us that we can't take it, I guess.
Yeah.
Can I just say, on my glass, glass workshops are not ideal for taking into community spaces. So I've been running glass workshops at the bathhouse and previous to that other studios for quite a while, and there is a demand, and glass is not a cheap material to use, and I find people are prepared to pay the price that's needed. And I've run half-day workshops, I've run full-day workshops, I've run 2-day workshops. I know Gillian has run workshops longer than 2 days. And you're talking about hundreds of pounds, and people want that experience. But trying to find venues that will accommodate that, will accommodate 2, 3, 4, 5 days on to run a workshop. I don't know where they are.
Yeah.
Maybe Claire, but I don't know.
I actually I work with a lady in America. I've worked with her for a number of years. I go out there to teach. She comes here and brings Americans over here, and we did a workshop in Alnwick in a hotel. But it's kind of in a room that's really for a wedding venue, and it was great because I think the workshop was 10 days altogether, and some of that we were going out sketching and visiting tourist locations. But because she was able to hire the space, we were able to leave all our stuff set up even on the days where we weren't working there, which was kind of an ideal situation. However, it was incredibly expensive. So she could run that because she was bringing people over from America who were paying more to do that. But I could have not used the same space to run a workshop for local people because of the expense of it. And I understand a hotel obviously has to make their money. So in some ways it was an ideal venue, but in other ways it wasn't accessible for local artists. So again, it is that lack of affordable, accessible space for the time that you would want it and for whatever you want to teach. So
yeah, that's really interesting to hear about, Gillian, that you were able to make that work in that set of specific circumstances. I've been looking at running a retreat for writers with Susie Walker, who runs Alnwick Story Festival. And we're just at the start of that journey. We're kind of it's about the inspiration of the space really for writers. So we want it to be an inspiring space, and there are plenty of those in Northumberland, but we also need it to have, it needs to be warm, it needs to be comfortable, it needs to have desks. There's a lot to that, and just working through what might be possible and going down that same route, that kind of like hotel wedding venue route, is piquing my curiosity, but making me realize that actually, the tickets for this would have to be expensive, relatively, to cover what we would be doing and to make sure that we were paid as well. I think just kind of that bit of the picture and understanding it. There are some really interesting models around wellbeing retreats using wedding venues in Northumberland when they're in their downtime. So there are certain wedding venues like Brinkburn which is an incredibly inspiring venue. I don't know whether any of you have spent any time there, but it is, I mean, it's overwhelmingly beautiful and ancient, and there's a lot of inspiration there. And they are very open to what is possible in those spaces. I mean, obviously, yes, you would still have the idea of like looking after those spaces and the polythyrenes, the poly sheets and all that sort of stuff, but there is possibility, and sometimes it's us making enough time to almost do collaborative research. So it's like, if I'm off researching over here and you're doing that, and then how do we bring all that together? And there's only a limited amount of stuff I've been able to do from my desk in Northumberland for Culture Northumberland, and I've found out quite a lot when I was looking at the studio research, but there's so much more work to do, and I'm really curious about leaning into that and understanding how we might be able to actually set the parameters so that if a venue's never thought of it before, we're like, okay, well, this is how it's going to work. Here's the contract that you can sign with us. This is going to lay it all out, and obviously we'll sign their hire contract as well. But sometimes it's like nudging that, isn't it? Like, is this a creative opportunity for us? And then if it is, where do we get the energy from to deliver it?
Yeah, can I just come in there and just say that, like, Ellie Davidson Archer, who still has a studio at the Old Bath House, because it was no longer possible to do open studio events, she has started working with the Rig and Furrow up at Acklington. And while it is a wedding venue, it is only a wedding venue between certain months. And so when it's kind of dead time for them, she is now organizing selling events, artists kind of selling events, and providing that opportunity for artists. So she's kind of linked up with them and is carrying that on, which is, you know, is a positive kind of coming out of the Old Bath House.
Amazing to hear about that. And I do feel like we went through this real surge of generosity and reciprocity, and Layla and I just podcasted about this topic on Friday. It'll be coming out soon. And I feel like, from my point of view, the reciprocity part of it has started to die back. And listening to you guys, I don't feel the same way. So I'm really wondering and leaning into this piece of the picture where if we have something, a resource or a thing or funding or an idea, how we share it, because it felt like it all exploded in a really positive way in the pandemic, and then everyone pulled back for lots of reasons. You know, we're all dealing with different kind of life circumstances, and some people are burnt out now, some people are financially really struggling. So it is really interesting to hear of that scenario with Ellie, and that she's sharing that with you all. That sounds amazing. I've asked a few times with different artists about Christmas markets and the selling opportunity around tourism we've mentioned already, because there's something in the sustainability of being an artist and knowing that, okay, well, around Christmas time, if I do 3 markets and they're really popular, for example, then it's going to bring this much income in. And then I know that. And one of the things that we're really struggling with at the moment, and I struggle with in my own practice, is there are so many shifting sands. Which ones can we rely on? Which ones are going to hold us up? And I think we're all questioning what those are and how people are, you know, audiences coming to galleries, audiences coming to theatre, people buying things from independents. It feels like we're not quite sure, you know, we don't quite know, there's nothing concrete to land on. So I'd love to hear about your particular experience of selling, whether that's Christmas markets or one-off markets. That would be super interesting if anyone wants to talk on that point.
I feel that, like, with Christmas markets, people are often looking for small gifts. So you're not going to be very lucky if you sell something big and quite expensive. So you're having to kind of gear down maybe what you usually do and try and kind of hit that small gift market. And, you know, do you want to be doing that? Do you want to be spending time kind of doing that? Is a question you've got to kind of ask yourself.
I think for me, I found as a painter, I mean, I did quite well in the Old Bath House, but that was because I was selling other things. I was having cards made, I was selling small prints and things like that. It was very rare to sell a big painting. You know, yeah, it's great on the basis that you've got more people looking at your work. So that was always very good. But to actually make any money is very difficult on a Christmas market kind of basis as a painter.
Yeah, super interesting.
I agree with that. I mean, The old bath, it feels like we keep harking back to the old bathhouse, but I think it's because that was such a great model
And
that
it
for us
worked.
really
It
worked in so
worked, didn't it?
many
You were there
ways.
together.
Yeah.
You had
And
the
we're
open
so supported by the
studios. Yeah.
community as
Mhm.
well. That was the other thing. So, for example, when we had our Christmas open studios, I can't remember, Helen, you'll probably know the numbers more than I do, but the Christmas one would be so well attended by people, and not just local, but people coming further afield. From really surprising places as well, sort of word of mouth, and of course we would promote it as well. Um, as a painter, it is tricky. Again, I'm kind of on the same page as Laurie, so I do very well with cards and prints and things, but originals, for me to sell my originals, I'd be going a little bit further afield to somewhere like the Borders Art Fair in Kelso, which I'm not doing this year. I'm having a break this year because I've got 2 exhibitions coming up. But I did that 3 years in a row, really. And so that's kind of where I'm having to go, aside from commercial galleries, to sell my work. So it's really varied throughout the creative sector as to what you need, I think, which is good. I mean,
Yes,
that's a
it's a real
challenge that
pick
we
and
all.
mix, isn't it? Like you say, well,
Mhm.
I've done that, and then I'm having a year off that, but then plan.
Yes,
There's some forward planning that you can do in knowing how things are going to kind of
absolutely.
work. And actually, going back to the point about your daughter, Helen, there's some expertise here, isn't there, in being able to share. Okay, well, this art fair is well worth investing your time in, both to create the artwork for it or to get ready for it, or this one's a bit quieter, but it'll be the smaller gifts or the cards or
It's
what,
also
there's something there.
it's also location as well, though, because
Yes.
she's young, and it's like I think her market is more actually Newcastle. So it's realizing that as well. Rural Northumberland is perhaps not her, if she has done a few markets. She's taken part in the Bathhouse Open Studio events and a couple of other places in Northumberland, but that is not her market. She needs to be where there are younger people and more like cities, more like Newcastle,
I've
so
got you. Yeah, that's good to hear. So we're going to close soon, but I'd love to talk to you more about online presence. So Gillian's mentioned this incredible sounding project that obviously has gone international, which sounds amazing. I need to check that out. And I will share more of your artist bios and online spaces, obviously, in this post that accompanies the podcast and the video. But I'd love to hear from you about how you're feeling about showing up online, like what that feels like for you, whether you're doing regular classes, whether it's a social media thing, whether you have blogs, how you look after your websites. I'm just really curious as to what's been possible for you before the pandemic. We heard a lot of, oh yeah, I probably should have a website, or oh, I probably should be on Instagram, and then during the pandemic there was a huge shift to people kind of going, oh, okay, right, come on then, we'll make all this happen. So how's it been for you all?
Well, I've got a website, and I've got workshops that not now, as I've stepped out of the bathhouse, but I had workshops on my website. People would book them online, and that was like fantastic. During the pandemic, I even started doing workshops online, which I didn't really like, but I did it. So that for me has worked really well, and so because my business is changing now, I have to revisit my website. That needs changing. I feel quite good on social media. I'm posting quite a lot. I use Facebook. A lot of my customer base is actually on Facebook, and I post on Instagram as well. Yeah, so and I do try and keep up a regular newsletter that goes out, and I get quite a good response from that, because it's like, I've been doing it for 20 odd years, and I feel like I've got a very solid customer base, a very loyal customer base that are still kind of moving with me. So that feels really nice, and that is through, a lot of it is through, I guess, online. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it's really working for you, Helen, and you've got, like you say, those customers that can hear from you, that can like a post, that can share with their friends, that's set up and it's working quite well for you. That's really good to hear. And I know
Yeah.
that there will be people inspired by that, because people have really struggled in the past to set up that online presence in a way that they're proud of and happy with, and do their artwork and
But
immerse
then,
themselves in their practice.
yeah, I suppose alongside that though was always that like my studio was open to the public. So there was a lot of face-to-face contact. And that then reinforced the kind of online stuff as well.
Yeah, great. And Laurie, what about for yourself?
I don't have a website currently. I did have a website whilst I was at the Old Bath House, but while I'm going through this period of study, I've closed that down. My future plans are to have a website, to do a newsletter, to do blogging, etc. And I think they're all essential parts of being an artist. I do have a social media presence currently, although not very often on it, to be honest. But I know that is part of something that you've actually got to do. It's essential, to get your work looked. In the past, I've done Artist Support Pledge, which is Matthew Burrows. I mean, that works very well, although it's a little bit limited. If you're thinking of selling big paintings, you're not going to do it for 200 quid, are you really? So I think there are things out there that are worth looking at. Leslie McNeish's Tin Shed online gallery is something I'm looking at as well.
Great. Yeah, we'll share some of those links if people are hearing those terms for the first time. We'll share those in the posts. One of the things that I've been doing this year outside of my Culture Northumberland work is partnering with Berwick, Create Berwick, to do this year-long supportive mentoring class around Substack as a platform. So Substack is a platform where you can have a free website that is powered by blog posts and a newsletter. So you can have an online presence and people can sign up to receive email newsletters from you, and it's all there and ready to go. You can also have audio on there and video on there. And I think there's a real opportunity for artists who are in between websites to build something up there because of the email subscribers. You can take them anywhere you go. So if you wanted to move them over to another mailing list platform like MailChimp or one of the others, you could do. So I have a free masterclass that I delivered for Create Berwick that they said I could offer out to the whole of the Northeast, which is very kind of them. So they partnered with the other two CCZ projects to say that, yes, actually anybody can access it. So I'll leave the link in the post. And if any of you want to do that masterclass, it's just under a couple of hours long, so it's quite thorough, and it's with lots of artists and creatives and people who are kind of leaning into the possibility of what that could be for them. Substack describe themselves as a new engine for culture, and I've been writing there since April 2022. I moved the Culture Northumberland newsletter there because it was going to be free to host it there, and we were about to hit our limit on MailChimp, which is 400 before you start paying to send newsletters. So it was a sustainability thing, really, but it's offered some opportunity and potential for us to advertise artists' work. So that's what we've been looking at doing. Whether we can, I think we've got about 14 artists, individual artists, paying to have their work advertised and promoted through blogs and online presence. Really, the purpose was to just test it as a model, and to also offer artists that opportunity to be interviewed by either Beth or I, and to have that online presence sent out to everybody that's been supporting Culture Northumberland. So we've got like 500 on the mailing list, but we've got thousands across social media because it's been running for the 3 years, but there was something before that as well. So we've got that kind of audience that are really interested in culture and really interested in supporting artists. So I'll put more in the post, but just to mention that, Laurie, that you'd be very welcome to do that workshop if that was something that you wanted to do.
That sounds really good. Yes, thank you.
And Gillian, yourself online, how's it all feeling for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's good. It's really kind of been, it's a big part of my creative business, actually. I started creating online e-courses, workshops. I think I did my first one about 12 years ago. So it was a big thing in America when I first started, but there wasn't really very many artists doing it here. So I feel like I was kind of an early adopter of it. And it was very much tutorials. I'd paint and share my process online. I had different themed online courses. I had a portraits one and a landscape one and a drawing one. And I guess from that, the thing that I kind of started to realize that with the kind of artists that I was working with, they were on the cusp of wanting to take the artwork a little bit more seriously. And there was a real there was a lot of online courses that showed you how to create art, the practical, the materials, the paint, color mixing and all that. But there was, from what I could see, a bit of a lack of more talking about the purpose of creating art, what you want to communicate, what do you want to say, and what kind of art do you want to create in a more individual, tailor-made way, rather than me saying what to do. So that's where my program kind of came out of that, and from that I've ended up mentoring a lot of artists after that. So the online really is a powerful part of my business, and it has enabled me to reach people all over the world, which obviously it's just, in the pandemic, is what kept me going. I have to say, when we weren't able to sell our work or teach workshops or anything, the fact that I had this online community was really the thing that kind of kept me going. So it's definitely been the mainstay of my business so far, and it also allows me time to, because that's the thing, isn't it? Is we all suffer from lack of time in creating our art, but it's enabled me to have those two strands working alongside each other. I create my art in the way that I want to create it without having to think of it so commercially. And then I have that, which kind of is the foundation to both of those things. So it's been a really powerful tool for me, definitely.
Oh, that sounds amazing. It's really nice to hear about that kind of early adopter energy, isn't it? Because sometimes you just see that, don't you? See that opportunity and you think this is something, I'm going to just run with it, and I'll just try. I know for me, now I have clients all over the world as well, which is relatively new. What I've found and leaned into is that they really, really like my accent. When you just like,
Yeah,
such a small thing,
well.
but the Americans,
Yeah.
and that's what I was thinking when you were saying, like, a lot of the Americans and the Australian folk are just like, I just love listening to your accent. You could teach me anything, I would just listen to you all day. And it's really interesting because it's not something that I would have thought of until they started saying it to me. So there's an opportunity there. The tech side and all of the rest of it, there are always ways to figure it out, so some of us will feel desperately uncomfortable in the figuring out process and then maybe not take it any further. But there is an opportunity there, isn't there, that there's an endearing quality to being able to share your work from this little pocket of Northumberland all across the world, and how that then ripples and helps us to feel supported.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, when I say I didn't know what I was doing when I started, I'm not exaggerating. I really made it up as I went along, but I kind of thrived in that in the beginning. You sort of you do just figure it out, and now I have a virtual assistant who kind of deals with the more sort of tech based. And I remember when she first started doing, she said it kind of looks okay from the front from the front end, but the back end is a mess, just because I'd really, I was learning from books how to build a website and all of that. But I think kind of taking it back to our discussions with Rebecca and with myself and Helen, I think it is going back to this energy, like you don't have to know what you're doing before you start doing it. You just, you learn by doing it. And I think this is kind of part of our conversations, is we don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to do something, and how that's going to evolve. I don't think we need to know all the ins and outs of it. It's just, let's try something and see what happens. And not everything works, but that's okay too. So it's, it's all kind of wrapped up in the same sort of thing as individuals, and with collaborations as well. You just make a start. That's that's the thing.
That's it. And there's just there's such an energy of being alive in that, feeling like you're moving and shaping things in real time, and bringing all of your different sets of expertise and the diversity of your experiences. It's really quite exciting to see how things might pan out. I know, just aligning with the Arts Council 10-year strategy, and I'll finish on this, that there's a lot of emphasis given to the hyperlocal, to making art in a way that is right for this place and for these people. And that's what really excites me about talking to you all, because I feel like I've had a deeper insight into how you all are working and connecting, and very unique in your approaches, but there's there's a really lovely set of shared values about coming together. So I've really enjoyed the conversation. Very grateful to you all for giving up to the time to talk to me, and we'll share more, obviously, of your online presence in the post, and we can keep these conversations going. What will happen from here is everything goes out online, and like I said, it's a very transparent process, and then there'll be a short report of recommendations to Wendy Scott at Northumberland County Council, from Beth and I, who runs Culture Northumberland with me. We'll consult with Layla Darrenville from North East Cultural Freelancers, and we'll just sort of see, okay, like, where are we taking this next? It will probably end up being another Arts Council application, or at least a funding application somewhere. We'll obviously keep our eyes open as to what the other opportunities are, but it would be lovely to have more conversations along the way of shaping what that is, and connect back in with Rebecca as well. So we'll look to do that. But thank you all so much for being here. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking us. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.